Firstly, this morning on the show, I want to introduce you to a 21-year-old young fella by the names of James Tennant. Now, James could barely say his home name. Since the age of 4, he struggled badly for long periods to get a word out. This is due to his severe stammer, until he decided something had to be done. Since then, he's made what can be best described as steady progress. He credits this steady progress to the Mcguire programme for his speech development. The same course, by the way, that helped the pop star Gareth Gates and also educating Yorkshire student Mutch. I'm very, very pleased to say that James joins us here in the studio this morning. Now, please bear with us here. I'm sure you can fully appreciate this is not an easy thing for James to do. He wants to tell his story. He's a little bit nervous. I don't for 1 minute doubt being here in a studio, microphones and speakers everywhere. I think you're incredibly brave. James, a very good morning. Welcome to BBC Radio Cumbria.
James.
Good to have you with us.
Tennant, thank you for having me.
It's lovely to have you on the show. And I want you to take as much time as you need here. Yours was a desperately bad stammer. This takes us back to you, James, at the age of 4. The stammer started in your early life. Just for the sake of myself and for listeners to BBC Radio Cumbria, were you made aware that there was a trigger, or was this something that developed during your early years?
Yes, I have to say I don't know why I started to stammer. I don't know what was, I don't know what was behind me starting to stammer. Something back in the day probably started it, a person I spoke to, or something happened. I possibly got stuck on a word and then it went from there. It's about experiences, and yeah, I remember from the age of 4 I wasn't the same as everyone else. When I was at school, it took me longer than everyone else to say words, to get words out. So yeah, I was aware from a very early age I had a stammer.
It must have been incredibly frustrating.
Yes, when you know the words you want to say, but they won't come out. It is the most frustrating thing in the world when you know exactly what you want to say, but you can't say it.
How has that affected you through your life to date, the building up of relationships as a young toddler, playing in the playground, in a classroom? How's it affected you when it comes to job interviews that you've been for, making friends generally? Difficult?
Yes, very hard. Life 3 years ago and before then was very, very tough. Every day was a big lie. Every day I was trying to swap words. I was avoiding sounds. I was trying to get out of talking. I remember at school when I had to answer something in class, couldn't say the word. I remember at university, had to go around the class, say your name. The words wouldn't come out. I remember one year, it was my mum's birthday. I couldn't even look her in the eye and say happy birthday. All these things, all these experiences you have from over the years with getting stuck on words, it's a very, very bad place to be.
We were talking just off air as we played out that tune from the Beatles a few moments ago, James, and you were describing to me in your younger years, You would look away from people. You couldn't even look them in the eye. It's such a shame, really. I mean, this is just a communication problem that you had. Wasn't your fault. For that reason, did you find yourself almost sinking into yourself, becoming very, very reserved?
Yes, I wasn't the person I wanted to be. I couldn't say what I wanted to say to family, to friends, to people at school. As I said, I've got all of these experiences from over the years which feeds a stammer. You stammer because you're scared of talking, you're scared of the person's reaction. So for a long time I tried to pretend my stammer wasn't a problem. I tried to cover it up, but I was so terrible at hiding my stammer. It was always there. I would get stuck on words, I would block on words, people would put the phone down on me when I tried to make a call. If I had to talk to a stranger in the street, some of the time they would walk off. Life was hard.
Life was hard. Life was truly difficult. At what point then, James, did you decide enough was enough and you were going to do something about this stammer, assuming that there could be something available to you in the way of a therapy, a treatment, call it what you will?
Yes, this was 3 years ago now. It was in 2012. I had just finished university and I got to the stage with my stammer where I was in such a bad place. I could barely hold a conversation. I could barely say the words I wanted to say, and I heard about this course called the Mcguire program. And when I went on this course, talking was tough. I couldn't say the words I wanted to say, but my life started to transform 3 years ago, and I started to get control of my speech.
You're doing incredibly well this morning. The only person that's stammering and fluffing his lines is me as I go through some of the scripts that I've got in front of me here, James. You've mentioned there the Mcguire programme. We're going to talk in a little more detail about the Mcguire programme in just a moment or two. We'll also be hearing a little more about the course itself and those involved. It's incredible to think this journey that you've come through and where you are now. The response from people you now meet, is it that much different to beforehand when you had the stammer?
Yes, I can be the person I want to be. I can say the words I want to say. Talking to family and friends, I now enjoy talking. When I go to work, I enjoy talking. I seek out situations where I can speak because I've got so much lost time I want to make up. So yeah, it's been a big transformation. I've got 20 years of stammering behind me, and now I'm trying to make up for lost time.
Incredible fella, incredible story. We'll hear more from James in a moment or two. James Tennant, since the age of 4, struggled badly for long periods to get his words out due to his severe stammer until he decided to do something about it. Something had to be done, and he put himself through this course, the Mcguire programme. We'll hear more from James. We'll hear about the Mcguire programme in just a moment. At the age of 4, but 3 years ago, started training to improve his speech. It's incredible. Joining me on air this morning, many a guest, very, very nervous, and I can understand why. And James, at this stage of the game, I'm thinking of handing over the headphones and the microphone, letting him get on with it. I'll head out of the studio and leave it to a true professional this morning. James himself underwent an intensive 4-day course. It was called the Mcguire program, that uses a technique called coastal breathing. It's used by opera singers. Iain Mutch is the regional director for the Mcguire program. Iain, welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Can you just firstly explain the Mcguire program to us? What can it do in just 4 days?
It can alter people's speaking behaviours and also their belief about speaking and any issues around that. So everybody involved in the Mcguire programme at any level is a person that's been through it themselves. Mm-hmm. You know, so I've been on it for 15 years, James has been on it for 3 years. And what we do is instill a physical technique that kind of gives you the confidence that, okay, there's nothing physically broken as far as breathing is concerned, and your diaphragm and your vocal cords and being able to speak. All the equipment is there, and we give a technique so people are able to use it. It's very mechanical to start with, and then it's all about altering all those other behaviours. It's the avoidance, it's the tricks, it's all that holding back in speaking situations that we have to end, really, and people have to be able to go into speaking situations and even get to the point where speaking is enjoyable.
A thought that never even crossed my mind, getting to a point whereby speaking is enjoyable. Iain, stay there for a moment or two longer. I've got James with his headphones on, so he can join us again in the conversation. We'll speak more to Iain Mutch, the regional director of the Mcguire programme, in just a moment or two. Also, my special guest, James Tennant, who's here with me in the studio. We'll speak more to Iain, we'll speak more to James on this subject in just a jiff. Here with me in the studio, James Tennant. James, a 24-year-old fella from Carlisle who contacted us here at BBC Radio Cumbria, keen to tell his story. Up until recently, James could barely say his own name, struggling badly for long periods to get a word out. This is all down to what was for him then a severe stammer, which he's had since the age of 4. Since then, there's been steady progress, as we've been hearing in the opening half hour of this morning's show, which he credits to the course that has helped the likes of pop star Gareth Gates and educating Yorkshire student Mcguire. We have Iain Mutch, who's the regional director of the Mcguire programme, joining us on the show. Iain, just breaking down for me, just prior to traffic and travel there, what development, what leaps and bounds can be made within the course of 4 days? Just to come back to you on the subject of the Mcguire programme, Iain, how does it differ from other speech therapies?
I think fundamentally because it is a group environment and it's also the intensity of the course as well. So I remember going to speech therapy and you'd do maybe an hour and then you'd perhaps go back in a week's time and you get a block of 6 hours over 6 weeks. Well, over a 4-day course, and we do over 50 hours over 4 days, and you need that intensity and that work rate in order to start to change these behaviours and to alter these behaviours and to make people into eloquent speakers. And that's what it's all about.
We're flagging up the Mcguire programme this morning, how it differs from other speech therapies. Let's not forget here, other speech therapies, they're also hugely successful, yes?
I've no idea. I mean, it didn't help me doing conventional speech therapy, and I don't think it helped James. And all I know is that on my first course, it was like flicking a switch, and suddenly it was the intensity, it was the work rate, and it was changing those behaviours. And, you know, it's 15 years down the line, it's 3 years for James, and it has been very, very successful.
I have to say, Iain, speaking to you this morning, and what I'm going to say verbally is what many listeners to BBC Radio Cumbria might politely be thinking. I had no idea that you yourself had suffered from a speech impediment. So at what age were you when you realised there was a problem, and more importantly, you wanted to do something to reverse what was a problem for you?
Again, it was probably, I was about 3 or 4, and I always remember having a stutter, and I went through both NHS and private speech therapy. I did hypnotherapy. I did another intensive programme over in Ireland when I was about 17, and aspects helped. Little aspects of techniques and things to do, things like eye contact, being more assertive, it all tends to help. But after that, I just decided to do my own thing, and it meant avoiding and increasing the tricks and internalising the stutter and always trying to hide it. And then it got to 2000, and in a way the frustration of always trying to hide it just adds to the pressure on you, and you're just waiting for the axe to fall, you know, when the house of cards is going to fall apart and suddenly the secret is going to be revealed, because you convince yourself that you're really good at hiding it. It's kind of self-delusion in a way. And then I went on the course, and as I say, it just completely altered things for me.
Listening to what you've just said, Dan, I'm just looking across the studio desk here to James, who's smiling and nodding. You relate to everything that Iain is talking about there, yes?
Yes, I do. We all have the same experiences. Everyone on the course has got a stammer. It doesn't matter where you're from, how old you are, whether you're tall, short, anything like that. We all come together because we've got a stammer, and for me that's the wonderful thing about it. You're all able to learn from each other's experiences, and you're all working towards the same thing, to work hard over a period of time to overcome your stammer. You can either say, look, I have a stammer, why do I stammer? It isn't fair, it's the end of the world, woe is me, so to speak. Or you can say, look, I've got a stammer, but I can do something about it if I want to work hard enough. And yes, I do agree there with everything that he said. I can completely relate to and understand those experiences before of getting stuck on words and the frustration and the pain.
And it really truly is an internal pain, isn't it? You spoke earlier to me, James, about almost feeling as though you were a liar, trying to communicate, not being able to use certain words. So I was going to suggest pussyfooting around certain subjects, but you avoided certain subjects, relating certain messages, communicating in a certain way, because you saw keywords as being an obstacle, yes?
Yes, you try to hide your stammer, so I would swap words. I would use filler words like and at the start of words. You are afraid that you don't want to be portrayed as a stammerer because it isn't the norm. Everyone else can take talking for granted. Everyone else can just open their mouth and say what they want to say. So if you can't, it's a tough world.
Just coming back to the Mcguire programme, James, was it a daunting experience? There seems to be a hell of a lot to take in just 4 days.
Yeah, so I first went on my first Mcguire programme course 3 years ago. I was very afraid because I was aware just how hard you have to work on your speech. I turned up to the hotel on the Wednesday, and that was the end of the old me and the start of the new me. It was finally the time where I had to do something, and slowly but surely you learn a brand new way to talk. You learn a brand new way to control your stammer, and over the past 3 years, that is what I've been working towards every day.
Just coming to you, Iain, you're a few years down the line that this journey that you've taken regarding the Mcguire programme.
Yeah.
Do you have top up when it comes to this programme, this form of therapy from time to time, or not?
Well, it's just an ongoing process that over time it becomes a lot more habituated, and so it's more natural to use a technique. But every now and again I'll make a mistake, I'll maybe slip up, I'll stutter on a word, I'll forget myself, but all I do is I just go back and I say it again, as I should have done. And it's called cancellation, and what we do is, if we make a mistake, and we just go back and we say it again as it ought to be said. And all that does over time, it just reinforces the positivity. And it's also eroding all those years of fear about sounds and words and situations.
Just in closing here, Iain, I'm looking across at James, who's wearing a belt across his upper chest here.
Yeah.
And breathing is key as he communicates.
Yeah.
Is this something key with the Mcguire programme? Do you from time to time find yourself, or have you in the past wore a belt across the upper part of your chest to help with your breathing?
Yes, it was about 6 to 8 months after my first course, I always wore a belt under my shirt around my chest. And it's just so you can feel your ribs expanding as you're breathing and speaking. It's just to remind you. And I stopped using it because I kept it on as I was about to go on a flight abroad, and I forgot I had a belt around my chest, and obviously the security guys tapped me down,
yes,
and they thought I was hanging drugs off a belt or something, and I had to make a quick disclosure, and I thought, okay, I'll maybe try without the belt for a while. So yeah.
Never look back.
Yeah.
Never look back. Iain, thank you so much for your time this morning. That's Iain Mutch, the Regional Director of the Mcguire programme. James, just turning to you. It's been an absolute delight to share some studio time with you this morning. For many who come into the studio, it's just nerve-wracking. I do this on a day-to-day basis, but it's nerve-wracking enough just to communicate with me as the presenter of the show without the problems of a speech impediment. I think you've done incredibly well this morning. Thank you for your time. Thank you for telling your story.
Thanks a lot for having me on the show. It's been fantastic to talk about my stammer and the Mcguire programme. Thank you.
That's James Tennant joining me here in the studio this morning. Something of a little bit of a different twist to this morning show. James getting in touch with us, a 24-year-old from Carlisle, contacting us here at BBC Radio Cumbria, keen to tell us his story, keen to share his journey. Up until recently, James could barely say his own name, struggling badly for long periods to get words out due to his severe stammer, which he's had since the age of 4. As you can see there, steady progress as a result of the Mcguire programme. Speech, stammers, defects. We're going to be talking more on this subject as we go through the course of this morning's show. So once again, my thanks going out this morning to James Tennant. He's just left the studio, literally punching the air with his fist, so pleased that he came through that conversation with me over the course of 40 minutes. I think that's incredible. James, a 24-year-old from Carlisle, contacting us here at BBC Radio Cumbria, keen to tell his story. For anybody to sit down and to share a microphone is going to be nerve-wracking, especially when we're talking live radio. When you consider James could barely say his own name, struggling badly, long periods to get words out due to a severe stammer, which he's had since the age of 4. It's just incredible. Thank you for some wonderful text messages and calls coming in. Many listeners to BBC Radio Cumbria finding James's tale totally inspirational this morning.